Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of Trifecta Collective, a holistic health practice. And this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. And welcome back to the podcast. We're so happy you are here. And we're excited for today's little bit different kind of episode, episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
And, today's larger topic is larger journey work in the plant medicine space. And I have quite a bit of experience in this world. And I also wanted to take this opportunity and officially share a little bit more about what's been going on with me and what is going on. Some changes and lots of changes that are about to happen later this week as of the recording of the podcast episode here. And which will lead us directly into our topic of the larger journey work. So if you haven't seen on stories and, I've teased this a little bit on other podcast episodes of, big changes coming, and I'll share more later. Now is the time where I'll finally share. So, I'm not going to share everything. I'm going to share pieces here. And, this is very personal things. And everything I'm sharing is things that I've processed for the most part, still processing some of it for sure. And I share this to help other people and to share some of the changes that will be coming up here. A lot of changes that will be coming up here for sure.
Yeah.
So
it's also going to be I feel like this is going to be a healing space in itself, because now that, you're not, I'm sure you've been sharing small things with people around you that you're close with, but this is more like letting it out. It's officially happening. So this is also going to be a healing space for Megan today too.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, this is also, and we'll see. Emotions are pretty high with me right now, so we will see. This is also the last time you will see this space in this recording, and you will stop seeing this on social media by and large. And this seems sudden. Some of it is. Some of it's really not. Some of it's things most of these things have been going on for quite some time. And when I went to Columbia back in March, it was a lot of medicine. It was big medicine. It was something that I was ready for. And I will certainly share more about that ayahuasca and wachuma experiences specifically. And these things are also not uncommon in this space. Is the other thing that I will share. And the reason being is, with a lot of these bigger medicines, and I'll say even with psilocybin and MDMA, a lot of the discomfort, this dysregulation, lack of alignment is presented in a way that makes it very clear and obvious. And that's really what the ayahuasca did for me. It just made these things really obvious to me that I had a choice, and it was a pretty clear choice of what to choose. So to share more, my current partner and I are separating and splitting up. And we have been living in Virginia for quite some time. I've lived in Virginia for the better part of 17 years, pretty much my entire adult life. I came here to go to college. I grew up in Pennsylvania and came down here to go to college, and traveled a little bit within the state of Virginia, but have been in the state of Virginia ever since then. And now is the time to close that chapter. And so we have sold the house. It will officially be done as of Friday. And it is Monday when we are recording this, so 5 days from now. And I am going to travel. For the foreseeable future, there is no time limit. There's also not an exact plan. I can tell you that I'm starting in Michigan and I'm actually super excited. Shannon and I are going to meet in person for the first time ever.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait for that.
I know. Yeah, I'm so excited too. And yeah, so we're gonna be up in Michigan. I am supporting in a retreat, in a psychedelic retreat, while I'm up there, and then I'll actually be hanging out up there for the better part of a month. It'll be almost 2 months as of right now. So it'll be about mid-August is when I'm scheduled to be in Michigan, and then we'll see. There really is no exact game plan. And I also know that that is right for right now. Whether I stay in Michigan for a little bit longer, whether kind of the idea that I have in my head is I will be traveling the general Midwest. No specifics of what that looks like. The Midwest is a pretty big place, and but that is kind of the goal. I'm feeling very called to that region. I'm feeling very pulled away from the East Coast. I've been on the East Coast for the vast majority, really for my entire life. Feeling called away from that, feeling called into the more of the center of the country. And I also know that more will come to light kind of once I release this space and am in a different space, that has already come to me. And so I'm putting a lot of trust and faith in the universe, whatever you want to call it. For me, I just, I'm calling it the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, and to guide me from there. But as of right now, yeah, I have a game plan until mid-August, and then TBD.
And I mean, and Megan and I have talked about this previously, but once you leave your current space and venture, into the new, I have a feeling it's just gonna, like, I'm envisioning like a red carpet just like rolling out, and like all the steps are gonna be so much clearer and things are just gonna start to flow. So I'm so excited to see you in this new journey and see what it brings for you. I have a feeling it's gonna be really good. So I'm excited for you.
Yes, I am very excited as well. And as you can imagine, there's been a lot of stress, there's a lot of busyness, a lot of emotions of all sorts that have come up around this. And so I've spent a lot of time, yes, being busy, and if you've ever sold a house, gosh, it is so much work. It is so much work to prepare for that, let alone moving. And it'll be me and my car that will be traveling. And so preparing for that whole experience, which I've never done before, never envisioned that before. But once again, this also feels 100% right for me at this time. And so, yeah, this will be the last time you see me in this space. Work will still continue. The podcast will still continue. I will still be here. I will just be in different spaces moving forward. And so excited to be able to switch things up, different backgrounds, different places, different energies, and be able to share along that journey for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I have specific questions I want to ask you, but I want to let you talk more about wherever you want to start with like your journeys and whatnot. And then, I can ask my questions after you get into that.
Yeah, well, perfect. Okay. So interrupt me. Shannon's just going to interrupt me as I go along and ask me questions about anything and everything. So, and Shannon knows, I think pretty much everything I'm about to share for the most part, I think. So none of this is going to be a crazy surprise to her. So things that really started for me. So I've been in the psychedelic space in larger journey work for several years now, and things were going pretty well through November. And I did a journey last November, and I don't want to say things went wrong. Things got stirred up. It is really what it feels like, what happened. And looking back now, it's a lot easier. In the moment, November to March was a very challenging time for me. After my journey in November, and it was, my journey was with a familiar group, familiar facilitators. It was beautiful and lovely, and there was nothing wrong with the journey itself. And we did MDMA the first night, and we did psilocybin the second night. And for me, it stirred up some new things, and it felt like a new layer was really tapped into during that journey that was very uncomfortable. It was a very challenging journey for me. It was very, very challenging. I was physically ill for the vast majority of it, which if you're getting ready to go into that space, by the way, that is not super common. Uh, I think I've only seen one other person get sick,
Wow.
and it was actually during that journey as well. And so it's not a super common thing. It is unlikely that you will get physically ill during a journey. It's on the table. It's not super common though. So I was physically ill for a lot of it. I had a couple really big emotional pieces, and yeah, it was really stirring, and really I left the journey feeling very unsettled. Like that evening,
Mm.
just like restless energy was still there, and then I was extremely emotional the following days. And yeah, it was very, very challenging, and the best way I can describe how I felt for weeks after was just a sense of unsettledness. It was different than anxiety. It was like someone poked the bear and just like poked it enough to be super annoyed, but not actually do anything about it. And I learned a lot of lessons between that time frame. I sought out all of my usual modalities to settle myself, to rest, to integrate. I always work with a variety of people for integration after journey space, people that were in the journey space, people who were not in the journey space, and it wasn't cutting it. Nothing was cutting it. Nothing was helping me, and I was having a lot of sleep issues, and just it was really challenging. So I sought out new help. I sought out new types of individuals, local and otherwise, which helped, which was very supportive. And I'm so grateful for. There's one particular local woman who I have connected very deeply with, who is in the healing space, and so grateful for all of her work. I also know we were meant to meet at that particular timing and do the work that we needed to do together, and I foresee us continuing to work together in the future. And I learned some other really valuable lessons of what it really feels like to carry other people's energy that is not mine. And really, that was a tough lesson for me. It brought up I think in the SIBO episode, I had a SIBO flare that was energetically led. This was it. I was holding on to someone else's energy that wasn't mine from that space that triggered a physical symptom. And once I was able to identify that it wasn't my energy and release it, those physical symptoms went away.
So, and just for clarification, was this someone else's energy that you picked up from the retreat weekend or not?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And I also learned this lesson exactly 1 week before my first retreat that I held solo. And I don't think that was a coincidence. And it was really, for me, it felt like a lesson of be so careful and be so mindful of what I bring into my spaces to protect other people. And also that I probably need a different level of protection than probably some other people in the spaces that I commonly journey in, because I'm very energetically sensitive
Yeah.
to big energies. And not that these were big energies, and once again, I don't think anyone did anything wrong. It was really just a lesson about how I need to protect myself and set up some boundaries with myself, especially in journey space where there's a lot of big energy that is moving around.
Yeah. So do you feel comfortable sharing like what you were doing before you went into that space to protect yourself versus what that looks like now for you?
Yeah, I would usually set up. I'm a big energy bubble person.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with an energy bubble, I tell clients about this, but the
So
way I do it, yeah, is I usually put my hands over my heart and I imagine, and I do this pretty much on a daily basis before I talk to anyone, is put my hands over my heart and I imagine basically my energy expanding out into a bubble that is protective, that prevents any energies that aren't mine, that don't belong to me, from coming into my space. And if they do try to come into my space, that they are sent back with love, back to the individual that they belong to. And this, especially as I'm personally doing deeper work in the trauma healing space, there's a lot of energies that can be picked up as a result of that. And, the energy bubble is great. And also, probably not enough in journey space when there's just a lot of energies. It's hard to maintain for me to be vulnerable enough and to go in deep enough to be able to process and release whatever I need to in journey space and also protect myself. So I use now crystals. I also use a protection belt. I will use different things around my space. I have a very strong connection to tobacco, so I can put ceremonial tobacco around me as a protector, and I remove myself a little bit more than I used to, especially with psilocybin. Less with MDMA, it's a little bit of a different type of experience. And I'm also just really careful for who is near me and really what is brought into the space, also what is brought to the space with the medicine itself. Because you can also pick up energies from the sourcing, especially with mushrooms, pick up a lot of that energy. So I'm very careful. And then I do a lot of clearing after. And that looks like using my own types of energy. I use Reiki among other types of energy. This also looks at sage and Palo Santo, sweetgrass, once again, crystals. Grounding is really beneficial. Getting near water, having salt near me. Sometimes I'll put salt around me as well as another protective mechanism, and also washing myself with salt. Really, really valuable. So those are some of the things that I do now, and I usually do most of those now, just because I don't want to be back in that space. And once again, I don't think it would happen. There were just some lessons that I needed to learn because I wasn't doing a great job at protecting myself from other energies.
Yeah, but I think that's a really valuable thing to share. I mean, even when we first started working together, I remember talking about that before we did like Reiki sessions, and me sharing experiences about, like, I have had friends, I know some people who have had some not great experiences, but they weren't using like any sort of energy protection before going into these situations. So I feel like that's a really, really important piece that I'm just glad we're talking about it and sharing it, because it's something that people need to be aware of if this is the type of work that you're doing.
Exactly. I also, especially since Colombia, it is rare that you'll see me without a necklace. And not that you can always see them, but almost always have a crystal. And I have a handful of these that I will often wear. Once again, not necessarily when I'm by myself, but when I'm on camera and talking to people or in physical space with people, it's just an extra level of protection, and it's an intention setting. For me, everything's about intention. So the wearing the crystals is about protecting my energies. And if something happens to get through, the crystal can absorb these energies.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny, I have my like altar set next to me and all my crystals are out on it and all that stuff. But I do see a lot of people who carry them on their body as well. And I think that's a cool thing, but it's really whatever works for you. And the most important part is the intention setting aspect of it. That's really what matters.
Yeah, exactly. And so, once again, like, it was up until Colombia, really, when I left in March, that I was still feeling some of this. I was feeling better. Things had improved, but there was still this sense of unsettledness. And when I got to Colombia, my first journey, so the way I did it, I went down to Colombia, a very traditional ceremony. If I can recommend anything, if you are going to do ayahuasca, two things I recommend to you. Number one, make sure you are being called to do an ayahuasca ceremony. It can be a lot. It is beautiful and amazing and a lot. Yeah. And I am so grateful I did it with the human beings that I did, who they grew up around plant medicine. This is what they've been doing essentially for their entire lives. There is a sense of just holding these medicines so close to their heart and just so sacred. And it really comes through during ceremonies, during everything that they do, from how they prepare the medicines to how they conduct the ceremonies, just everything. And I would be so hesitant to do it any other way because it is really, really big medicine. You also need someone who can really, someone slash people who can hold this space for you. It is very, very different than any other plant medicine I've ever done. And for me, I did three ceremonies. I also would not recommend doing one ceremony. It is That's not usually how ayahuasca works. Oftentimes it's at least two, if not three. I would say if you can do three is probably, I don't have experience doing two, but they really compounded on each other. It was also easy. I laugh when I say that it was quote unquote easier to tap in to the medicine as we went along. It also got stronger. Every day it did get a little bit stronger. And so the first day was weird. It was very weird for me. People fell asleep during the ceremony, which I someone else had actually prepared me for that. I was also mind blown, and I got a little annoyed that people were like asleep and snoring, and I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, it was the middle of the night. We started ceremony sometime between like 10 and 11 p.m. at night.
Wow.
And but I was mind blown that people fell asleep on the ground, and we're pretty much just laying on the ground, by the way. uh not my usual cup of tea, we'll say. Not my I'm not a big camper. That's not usually my jam, but we made it work.
So
And
did you not feel like tired? I'm assuming everyone else, because they fell asleep, it made them tired.
did it make them tired? Were they actually asleep? Were they in ayahuasca dreamland?
Yeah.
Or
Okay. Fair
somewhere
enough.
between conscious and not conscious? I don't know. I I also got sick the first night, and no one else did. So I think that played a role in it too, where I felt really nauseous. It is very, very common to get sick on ayahuasca, by the way. You also get over it really quick of just like getting sick in front of other people. It's just, I'm not a big sick to my stomach kind of person. And there was a lot of nerves going into it, being like, oh, gonna get sick, probably gonna get sick in front of other people. And that goes away really quickly. So, yeah, I got sick after my first cup. I did 2 cups. It is, once again, pretty common, but it really depends on who you're doing it with to do multiple cups in a night. Not everyone in our space did 2 cups. Several of us did. I got sick after both. And for me, the first night was pretty mild. Not a lot came through. The biggest thing that I can share that came through was a message of I was reliving a lot of my old patterns in new and different ways, which kind of started with where I am now of just, okay, I am not, this is why I feel out of alignment. This is why I feel so unsettled, is I'm reliving a lot of these patterns, and it is time for me to break free of a lot of those. And so, the first journey was fine, pretty mild, I would say, in general, nothing super crazy. I maybe fell asleep. I don't think it was real sleep at some point. Second night, we did 2 nights in a row, so 2 all-nighters in a row, which was also challenging. I like to go to bed between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, and to start a ceremony at 10 or 11 o'clock at night was a thing. Second night was much more challenging. It was a stronger batch on purpose, and there was definitely some crying after the first cup. The second cup was really challenging for me. I basically cried and shook for hours, I think. And and this is why after my experience, and once, not everyone had this experience, everyone had a different experience. And if you might have this experience, it's worthwhile to know this. So I had a lot of tools in my toolbox. I am pretty darn good at regulating my nervous system, of if I get dysregulated, if something big is coming up, I know how to breathe through it. I know how to regulate my breathing in particular to re-regulate my body, to allow my body to do what it needs to do. Oftentimes with psilocybin, I will shake, or I will feel like I need to shake as a somatic practice to move energy out, to get emotions out, to get that stuff out. This was on a whole different level. And I mean, it took me hours to re-regulate myself. And once again, thank goodness there was other people there who could hold the space, who could help and support in this. And thank goodness I had all of those tools in my toolbox. So yeah, just really, really important and really valuable to have those tools in your toolbox.
And to have people there with you. I mean, like, just so people understand, like, there was people there supporting her through this. She was not sitting in a corner alone trying to do this herself.
No. So thank goodness for that. And then the third journey was even more intense. I shared this with one of the women who was supporting afterwards, that thank goodness you were there, because I don't think I would have made it through without her. And it was beyond challenging is the only words I know how to describe. Super good, very healing, what I needed. And it was also incredibly, incredibly, incredibly challenging of an experience. And, so all of that is to say, like, the people who you were doing with, the people who are holding space for you, it matters so much. And I think this is with all plant medicine, but I will say just a special little star when it comes to ayahuasca, just because it can be really, really big. And if you don't have someone there who can hold that space and really support, I mean, I've seen this more than a handful of times, of people come out of that kind of space in not a good place. And I would never want that to happen to someone. And there's so much that we can do to prevent that by just being with people who know how to hold these spaces, who have this type of experience. And so just that experience, that knowledge is so, so, so valuable. So please do your research before you just like decide to hop into this.
Yeah, it's definitely about finding, because I know there are lots of people who host, events like this or retreats. And I will say some of them, because in the past, when I was feeling more called towards some of this stuff, I started to like search around online. I didn't know anyone else who was doing this stuff, so I couldn't, bounce it off anyone. And there are some very like MLM, for lack of a better term, like retreat companies who they bring tons of people in. You're with like 20 and 30 people. You're traveling to a different state or a different country. And like, those are the ones that I might be a little bit iffy of. But yeah, I mean, do your research, and definitely, I feel like the best way is to reach out to people who have already done it and ask for their opinion on the experience.
Exactly. And I know so many people, and our other practitioner, Brendan, has experience with this, of people who go into, especially psilocybin, and they go into these spaces to do retreats, and they're given the medicine and then they're left alone.
That's terrifying.
And for me, so I have done, just for reference, probably 5 to 7 MDMA experiences, and then 6 to 8 psilocybin journeys. And I still wouldn't, and these are macro doses, I'm talking 3 grams at minimum total. And I still wouldn't journey by myself. I mean, there's no way I wouldn't at least have someone with some experience in this space at least sit with me. They're called a trip sitter. At least sit with me. And this is not just a random person. This is someone who at least has some experience. And I also have enough experience where, generally speaking, I feel fairly confident that I know what I would need and can ask for it. but I need to make sure someone understands what I'm asking for and then can provide that should I need that kind of support. And once again, if you don't have experience in this space, you don't know. And it can be really, really challenging, to share more about my very first journey, because I think this will help people understand a little bit, because obviously I'm in a different space now. So my very first journey, I had already had experience with microdosing psilocybin. I had already done a ketamine session, and I'll say ketamine into like into psilocybin or MDMA, very different for me, at least. Ketamine, I just relaxed right into it, had the short journey. The journeys are short, usually between 30 to 90 minutes. Mine was about 45, 50 minutes, and kind of came out pretty gentle, nothing crazy. Now, I was also there with someone who was, like a qualified practitioner. I also did not do that one alone.
Yeah.
But my first journey on MDMA, I mean, I was in a very safe space with women who knew exactly what they were doing. They have decades of experience in the space. And I could not drop in. And what I mean by that is, when you take these medicines, part of what has to happen here is you have to release control and accept the medicine to do what it needs to do. And way easier said than done. And once again, for me, I mean, I had microdose, I had done this ketamine session. I was already in the energy healing space. I would consider myself an expert meditator at that point. I mean, I felt really confident in my abilities to drop in here. And I really challenged. And so I had an initial dose. I took 2 boosters, which is not super common. And I was still having a hard time. I felt it definitely a little bit. There were some things that were starting to come up. It was very uncomfortable. And one of the facilitators, I'll never forget this. She came over to me, and I was really upset. I mean, I was like upset that people were having. I was seeing other people have this experience, and I had separated myself at this point. I was in a dark side room by myself because I was angry and upset that I wasn't feeling all of these things that other people were feeling. And she was like, Megan, you have to accept it. She's like, I can't do it for you. She's like, put one hand over your heart, one hand over your belly, just breathe and listen to the music. And I remember being so annoyed with her and being like, girl, this is not going to work. I don't know what this is. What is going on here? And honestly, within maybe 5 minutes, probably not even that long of doing that, I dropped right in. And yeah, I mean, and once again, had I not had that kind of support and someone with that experience who knew what to do and told me to literally just lay down and breathe, who knows what have happened. Eventually I may have gone in, maybe not. I don't know. And I was able to have a really beautiful experience. I was able to connect with other people, which is very common. MDMA it can be done in groups. You do feel a lot of love, a lot of peace. I'll say my nervous system never feels so relaxed and regulated than when I do an MDMA journey. It's just a different level, and that is also not the case for everyone. I will say I've had seen people have very emotional and intense experiences on MDMA, but the MDMA allows the brain to relax a little bit, and that voice, the way I like to describe it, is that judgy voice that's always in your head, it goes away. And so it allows you to feel things and process things, emotions, traumas differently. And it takes, once again, for many people, some people do get emotional, but for many, it takes the emotion out of it. And so you're able to reprocess these things, these traumas. I remember I processed a lot from my childhood and from my mom during that journey. And it was, I don't know if I could have cried had I even tried to. It just, the emotion, the level of emotion that was there beforehand just wasn't there. And it dissipated, which felt very relaxing and relieving to not have that heightened level of emotion with a lot of these things. And it was beautiful.
And that's not the MDMA. This isn't one that you do super often. I feel like when we've talked, you haven't done that for a while.
No, so oftentimes my most common journey space is MDMA the first night and psilocybin the second night. You
Okay.
can do them together. I've done a couple, maybe like two journeys with just MDMA, just like a 1 day kind of MDMA experience. That's also happened, but I've done psilocybin definitely more by itself than I have MDMA by itself.
If you had to, and this might not even be a question that you can answer because I know it's different for everyone, but if you had to compare the two, the MDMA and the psilocybin, which do you feel like they help you process in the same way, or is it just completely different?
Completely different. Yeah. So the MDMA for me, especially the way that I experienced this, and this is how I mean, I really like how this is done. In doing the MDMA the first day, MDMA is very heart opening. It allows you to connect with other people, especially if you do it in the group space, which I am a massive, massive fan of doing these things in a group space, in a safe, supported group space. And the MDMA is very heart opening. I do feel like oftentimes it is easier to drop in the second day into the psilocybin, having the MDMA the first night. I don't think it's a requirement by any means, but I do feel like it's easier. You also can get very emotional on psilocybin. I think I've cried every time during every journey that I've ever done, almost every one. And yeah, it's really different. And it's almost like you can reprocess things with the MDMA, but then the psilocybin, once again, at least for me, and we are seeing studies with this too, the psilocybin helps to bring up
Mhm.
different things. And it helps to bring up maybe, yes, maybe some things, especially emotions, help you process and experience some of those emotions. It's really good for depression, really good for, yeah, just processing and also getting insight. I get a lot of insights. And once again, this is really common with psilocybin of just maybe next steps, maybe what needs to be done, maybe what should be done, maybe what I'm being called to do, different things like that. So, yeah, definitely a difference. MDMA is being more used, especially from like a scientific standpoint, for like complex PTSD, really significant trauma work. Because once again, you can process these traumas without that same level of emotion that you're experiencing as you're going through it. And I think especially it can be easier for someone to have a couple sessions maybe with that before going into psilocybin. I think for some people, I don't think it's necessary for everyone, but they are different. They are really different, and they both have a lot of value. And you can also do them together.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard you talk about, your experience with both of them together too, but it's it's helpful to know the difference. And again, like, totally it's based on what you're feeling called to do and what feels good to you and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah. And so, once again, going back to my first journey here. So the second night or the second day, we did psilocybin. And I experienced a very similar experience where I had a pretty hard time dropping in. And it was easier, I would say, and also still challenging. And one of the biggest things for me, and I've seen this quite a bit in circles of when I've been journeying and also as a support role and facilitating my own, is that it can be uncomfortable to really start to tap into this. Even if you've done a lot, once again, I went in having done a lot of trauma work. I did trauma therapy and hypnotherapy and all this energy work and brain retraining, all this kind of stuff, and it was still challenging for me to drop in. And a lot of times, especially if you like to avoid your emotions, if you spend a lot of time pushing those bad boys down and not feeling them, it is very uncomfortable to feel sometimes those levels of emotions and the amount of emotions that are coming up. One of the most beautiful moments for me during that first psilocybin experience was, once again, I separated myself. I had a hard time. I just put myself in that dark room. I spent a lot of time in that room, just secluded by myself because it just took me a long time and I didn't quite understand what was going on. And so I was having a hard time. I, asked one of the supporters, facilitators to come in and, she once again told me to lay down. And she just like put her hand on my back, and that triggered something in me. And then I was in it. I was crying. Like shaking, crying, like bawling, kind of crying. And it was really intense. And once again, being with someone who you feel safe with, who has experience, she knew that I needed a hand on my back, just a little bit of human touch, a little bit of human contact is what and that still triggers me to this day. If I am feeling restless and having a hard time, I need someone to come over to hold my hand, play with my hair, put a hand on my back, just like sit really close to me. And that really is very supportive. And it also, there's not a lot of places where we get really safe human contact that is not sexual. It is just care. It is care. It is love. It is support. And once again, this really depends on the space that you're in. And I've specifically sought out spaces now that I do feel safe, where that is welcome, that I know no boundaries are going to be crossed. And that is welcome, because that is a huge piece for me. And especially for women, it's a huge piece. And I've mostly journeyed in women only spaces. I've facilitated a co-ed. Columbia was also co-ed. And yeah, it's really, really valuable. And that journey was very challenging for me. One of the more challenging ones, not quite ayahuasca level challenging, but very challenging. And, common things that people can experience is a lot of processing emotions, which definitely happened for me. There was a death and a rebirth, which is very, very common for that to happen. And, depending on who you talk to and what you read, you can talk about an ego death. I can talk about, for me, it felt like a release of a lot of things that I had still been holding on to, and then being able to bring in anew. And I'm not going to share the specifics because it's quite personal, but just that death and rebirth aspect of a journey is very, very common. Another thing that I experienced that is also very common, and this was the hardest part for me. And towards the end, sometimes you are ready to be done. Maybe you've processed a lot emotionally and you're, okay, I'm really tired, and you haven't eaten. For most people, we go, and this is how I run my retreats too. You go in fasted, and you haven't eaten in a while. Maybe you haven't had the best sleep. You're in a new space. There's been a lot going on energetically and emotionally, and you're just like ready to tap out. And then it pulls you in, and then pulls you back in, and then sometimes keeps you there for a little longer. And this is what kept happening to me. And it was, some were really beautiful, some were challenging. And one of the last things I felt was this really deep, ultimate sense of loneliness and just being alone, which, once again, this is not terribly uncommon in this space. And in the moment, it was very, very hard. And it was almost this like dichotomy of like, I want to be alone, and also like, I'm going to be alone forever. And just like deep, really deep seated loneliness. And for me now, when I look back and reflect, and I've obviously spent a lot of time integrating and process that first journey, a lot of it has to do with, we are all on our own journey. And it's a lot of times we have to do this work alone. Yes, we can be supported. There's a lot of value in that. And at the end of the day, we're also kind of alone doing this. And you also need to be okay with that, and need to be okay with liking yourself and showing up for yourself and loving yourself before you can give that to other people, before you can expect that from other people, any or all of that. And it's okay.
I feel like even some of these things that you're saying, maybe not as intense, but even just comes with microdosing, like bringing up these really intense emotions that you might not know how to feel or that you've never felt before and whatnot. Yeah, even with microdosing, that again, not as intense, but I have also had some similar things with just like mini journeys, not anywhere near what you've done, and some big feelings have come up around it. And I want to go back to the death in the rebirth part that you brought up. So when you talk about that and what you experienced, did you feel like that happened all within a short weekend, or this followed within the month? Was this like a kind of like a stretched out experience?
It felt like it was going on forever, and also happened all at once. And time is really odd when it comes to working with psychedelics, especially in these larger capacities where, I the death piece of this seemed to last literally forever. And it was also very challenging, which is probably also why it felt like it was forever. And for me, I was witnessing as a bystander my death and funeral, and that was, I mean, that was weird and challenging, and yeah, very very hard. And then the rebirth was very very beautiful and amazing, and it was great. And for me, and once again, this is pretty common, just to have just experienced that death, my brain kept going back to that, like, oh, we just, and it can be hard to appreciate some of the beauty. And part of what I feel like I still learn is to appreciate the beauty in all of the hard. And ayahuasca taught me that lesson in a very challenging way of being very grateful for all of it, and being able to experience beauty in the hard, in the sad, in the grief, and the challenge, and the human experience as a whole. And yeah, so that is a huge lesson that I took away from the ayahuasca that has also presented itself many times previously.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like too with your ayahuasca trip. I mean, would you say that these are some of the biggest changes that you've made in your life after that type of journey?
Yeah, the first journey, there was definitely a lot of changes that came along with that. I would say not quite to this level, although I'm not. That wouldn't have been the right timing either. And yeah, I mean, the ayahuasca. What I've shared with a couple of people around me is, the decision to do all of these things and make all of these large changes, seemingly maybe drastic changes to some people. I've also never been more sure of anything, and that this is 100% right for me, and what I need to do, what I should be doing, what is going to be expansive for me, what is in alignment with me. And I don't think I've ever had that level of confidence in in any decision, let alone a handful of decisions that I'm making all at once. And yeah, for me, the ayahuasca was just, it was really, really eye opening. And it also cleared a lot in a very different way that other psychedelics have not. Once again, is it the psychedelics? Was it me? Was it the right timing? It's probably all of the above. And yeah, I mean, the ayahuasca was, yeah, I mean, it's really big medicine. I just realized I didn't touch on the wachuma, which was how we ended our last ceremony in Colombia in our experience. And we did a very, very traditional wachuma ceremony. And wachuma, if you're not familiar, is a cactus, very similar to San Pedro. So with ayahuasca, you drink ayahuasca, hit or miss on the taste. The first night, really not bad in my opinion. It got progressively worse as I got stronger.
Your body was probably like, I don't know how I feel about this anymore.
Yeah, like, we're doing this again?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to. So, but the wachuma, it's a powder that, and this is how we did it. And you can also make a tea with San Pedro and other variations of a cactus. But we took the powder in our hands, put it in our mouth dry, and then drank some water to get it down, which was also, just, you're eating the cactus. It tastes like it. It's fine. Yeah. And we did an overnight ceremony. There was a fire going the whole time. We were in a large teepee that was built on the land where we were on. And Traditionally Wachuma is very heart opening. For me, it was very healing for my sacral chakra. And when I spoke with one of the women afterwards who led this ceremony in particular, I found out that yes, heart opening for sure. And it's also used a lot in women's circles for womb healing, which I do. And I don't know if I've ever shared this, and I'm also not going to get in too deep into any of this, but I do also have a lot of sexual trauma. And I really felt like it cleared and healed so much of that during that journey. And I'll also say I had been doing work for almost 2 years leading up into that, around that work. And I felt like it was like the last bit of clearing and then healing around that, which also felt very, very magical. It was also a challenging experience, especially, you know, on the ground. Once again, just I was very physically uncomfortable, also very tired after many days of journeying. The taste, it's also really different. It felt like I wanted to sleep and was trying to sleep and was in a dreamland that was not sleep, that was not restful and activating. But it was also hard for me to like sit up because there was times where we would sit up and we would sing or do prayers, and it was very challenging for me to like sit up. It was also very hot, and I was very temperature oriented. I also did get nauseous, which once again, this is not super common for me. I also got nauseous towards the end and felt a little physically ill. I did not physically get ill, but definitely felt that way.
This sounds like some hard work. I'm sitting here in my head and I'm thinking about how like I get agitated about little things, like just being hot outside. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like this sounds like some serious hard work. If you're doing this, you got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just the physical side of things. And there was, we did a diet, they call it a dieta beforehand and during, where you're not eating certain things and you're really caring for your body with this because there are interactions with this. And this is kind of where we want to wrap up with is talking about ways to support yourself in and around these journeys. And if you're going to go do ayahuasca, I don't know. It depends on who you talk to. I felt like my dieta was nothing crazy. I was still able to eat meat. I was still able to eat chicken and some fish, which felt very supportive of my body. I do not do well with a more vegetarian based diet. I do better with animal based, higher protein diet. And so I was still able to keep some of that stuff in. Definitely no turkey. That can mess with your brain going into the ayahuasca space. So being very mindful of that. We were also fed chicken and fish during the week, which once again, and eggs, very supportive of not having to be vegetarian because that doesn't feel great, the best for my body. I would have done it, but it doesn't feel the best. And continuing on with that afterwards, also super important, and slowly transitioning back into a more quote unquote standard diet, standard American diet, although my diet's not very standard American. It's very clean by and large. And yeah, so afterwards, the journey work is hard. All of it can be very hard. The hardest part is going back into your quote unquote normal life. It's and I see this. I mean, I see this a lot. I see this with people that I've worked with. I see this with friends and other people that I journey spaces. And the best piece of advice I can give you coming out of these spaces is have integration support. Yes, you can do it by yourself, and I do not recommend it at all. I would never. I actually have a team. I have a team that I work with after every journey, and that team has changed and evolved and continues to change and evolve as I get what I need. And that it is the most important, because if you really want to heal, if you really want to see change from doing this work, and if you're doing this work, it's hard enough, you might as well go the extra mile to like really solidify it. Get people on your team to help you integrate. And that can look like a lot of things. Right now, for the first time in a really long time, I actually have a therapist on my team, and I'm working with a therapist who is aware of what I do and the types of healing that I've done. Not that she specializes in it by any means, but she is supportive and has some knowledge of it. I have people who are actual psychedelic in the psychedelic space who can help with integration, compassionate inquiry, energy healing, people who work on my physical body. All of those people are so valuable to me and have been a huge part of why I've been able to really make a lot of the changes and shifts and healing that I've done, because that's really where the real work is done.
Yeah, and I've even made that mistake after like a mini journey before, waiting too long to reach out for help. And this was after the first one that I had done, and it really backfired. I spent like a week being completely miserable when it was unnecessary. Like as soon as I reached out for help and support, the shift happened. And I remember I was so like frustrated with myself, thinking, like, why did you wait so long? It was so easy to just reach out and ask for help. So yeah, I mean, even with something smaller like microdosing, I don't recommend doing it without some sort of other support system in place.
Yeah, and here's the thing. People get caught up in what is microdosing supposed to be and what is this larger journey work supposed to be. And I've also had experiences that I've had really easy journeys that are beautiful. I mean, the most amazing, the most beautiful experiences. And then 3 to 4 weeks after that journey, some really big, some really hard stuff comes up, and it hits me out of nowhere every time. And I mean, I'm more aware of it now, but it seemingly just kind of comes out of nowhere. And once again, just having that integration support, having someone who is educated and also has the experience of this, you really need both. And if you don't have both, I think there's a lot that can be lacking in support. And I've seen not great support in a variety of fashions as well. And yeah, if you're going to do this work, get support of some sort on your team.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then do you want to tell us a little bit more about like what you can do for yourself, maybe as far as like supplements and whatnot, like before and after?
Yeah. So, and I'll say this. I would really recommend this both for MDMA and psilocybin. Ayahuasca is different. Ayahuasca, DMT, Wachuma, the mescaline, little different. And I would encourage you to talk to whoever you're working with, because it does depend. There's a lot of variation in that space. A little bit less variation when it comes to MDMA and psilocybin. So before either one, I'm just going to group these together. Magnesium glycinate, especially before MDMA. You can get a lot of jaw stuff with MDMA, a lot of jaw tightness, grinding of your teeth, jaw clicking, grinding, all that kind of stuff going in and going into an MDMA journey. It's rough. As someone who wears like a mouth guard at night and has a history of teeth grinding, it can get rough. So preparing with extra magnesium going into it, usually what I'll do is about 3 to 360 milligrams like a week beforehand. I double the dose. I do a dose before I journey, I do a dose after I journey, and then for several days afterwards. Super, super valuable, helps a lot with the jaw piece in particular, but can also help with, you can get headaches coming out of journey space, and it can help with limiting some of that. Post support, if you're going to do one thing, please do this thing, and that is serotonin support after the fact. And what is happening during your journeys here, and this is with both, but especially with MDMA, but really this happens with both, is you are getting a flood of serotonin to your brain. When you get a flood, that flood dissipates and you can get really, really low mood. You can have trouble sleeping. You can get depressed. You can get anxious. And it's just because your serotonin bottoms out temporarily for many people. And so 5-HTP, I usually like 5-HTP with B6 as a support for at least 3 days post-journey work, up to a week. And I find this to be really, really supportive. 5-HTP Supreme by Designs for Health is one of my favorites. I really like that product. I think it's really valuable. Staying hydrated is so, 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 so important. lots of electrolytes beforehand. LMNT is a really good one. I also recently started trying Salt, SALTT. Big fan. Really like them as well. So those are two really good. They're also very clean brands. So those can be really good. I also, yeah, staying hydrated, coconut water afterwards, really, really supportive. You're getting the hydration, the electrolytes. It also, I'm not a huge coconut water fan in a day-to-day life, but post journey, I am a huge fan of some coconut water. Like, give me all the coconut water. So that's really supportive. And then really just making sure you're caring for your body. The cleaner you can be, I think, from an eating perspective, I think the easier it can be going in and out. I also think, I just lost my train of thought. There was something where I was going with it, and then I thought of something else. So I'm going to see if I can come back to it. The other thing that not many people know, and this is really, really important, especially if you come from a chronic illness space, is that both of these things can trigger mast cell issues and histamine issues, which can lead to symptom flares. You can also get really bad headaches. You can also get really congested. You can also, I've seen like people have rashes or hives or get itchy. And for many people and they don't talk about this a ton, at least in any of the programs that I've done, educational programs I've done, I've also not seen very many people educated in this, in that, yeah, it can trigger mast cell issues. So oftentimes, like when I did my retreat, I had a couple mast cell stabilizers, antihistamine and Benadryl on hand, just in case, just to help and support. And we didn't need it. The one person who I thought needed it was already on it. We prepped. She was ready to go. She was already having some mast cell issues, but we were prepped even beforehand to make sure that it wasn't going to be an issue. So super valuable to have that information if you are prone to mast cell issues. So yeah, I think those are the biggest things. And then really just taking time for yourself. It's a lot. It's big work. It can be really, really exhausting. And so giving yourself just some love, some grace as you're going through it.
Yeah, creating extra space for yourself too. When you like know that you're probably going to be tired after, and try and just make that space for yourself.
Yeah, I always try and take at least a day or two off after any of my larger journey work, after my larger weekends, because I know I need that time to just like decompress and integrate a little bit.
Yeah. Meet with your team, help get things going.
Exactly. So yeah, that is larger journey work with a little bit of education here, and mostly just sharing experiences and a little update here. So yeah, excited for you guys to be able to keep you guys updated on my new travels and my new adventures and everything that's going to come along with it. Super excited to share that. And thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we are newer. And so I don't know if I can say brand new anymore, because we're getting a few episodes in here, but we are still newer. So any likes, follows, subscribes, any 5-star reviews, if any of that resonates, we really, really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you next time for our next episode.
Yeah. I just want to say too, thanks for sharing, Megan. I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people. I know that's big stuff. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.